Fake or fact? You tell me.
Across an immense ethereal gulf, minds that are to our minds as ours are to the beasts in the jungle.
This is an old radio show, and they had a much higher attention span back then. But fake or fact? My whole point was years ago, when there was just radio, there was this show that happened on Halloween Eve, October 30th of 1938, and the show started out as normal, where there's this people just know the War of the Worlds equals this. It's kind of fake news, because it was one of the first times that over radio they had told a story that sounded so real, and they were using real city names, and it was like part of the story was like this broadcast that you just heard, where they were saying, and right now we can see from the observatory that that they're shooting and the people are in the streets, and so some people fell for it. They didn't know. They were sitting in their living rooms, in Idaho or in California or another, listening to this radio. And, this was pre-internet. People didn't find out everything right away. And so it apparently caused some mass hysteria. And it got me thinking, right? You've got to be careful with what you say over the media, whether it's fake or fact. And so here we are in 1984, and we're learning from Orwell and through his characters all of these ideas about changing the truth, right? I mean, he even works in that ministry, the Ministry of Truth, right, where he spends his days rewriting history so as to completely obliterate anything from the past. And so people are confused what's really true and what's really false. And so we're going to take a look today. We're going to take a look today at an article that really is a modern day War of the Worlds situation. One of the neatest things about literature is when warnings come true. And years later, things that authors had predicted, they saw coming, and they wrote about, and they warned in certain ways, and we kind of see them come true. So right now, because of technology, there's a real sort of War of the Worlds happening, and there's a real 1984 situation happening. So we're going to look at that and see the connection. So the big idea, we should evaluate the warnings of literature. We should evaluate the warnings of literature. Students are going to be able to analyze the social and cultural function of British literature. So we're looking at how 1984 served in the culture and how it still serves in our culture today. What are some warnings of modern literature that we should heed? Why do we often not heed warnings by those who seem to have an eerie ability to predict? Now, by Charlie Warzel, and debate. You'll be able to debate similarities and differences with 1984. So that's where we're going. All right. You are going to access this article on Google Classroom. You're going to read the article, and then you're going to briefly answer one of the questions in preparation for a pop-up debate. So grab that article. It is super interesting to see how we are having some actual 1984 situations happening. And there are some people that are trying to warn us. There's some people that are trying to warn us. By the way, for those of you who might want to use it, I included, you'll notice in the Google Classroom, I included a link, Rewordify, that website that if you stick the link in there, it will break it down for you if that makes it a little bit easier to read. Although the article isn't extremely complex. It's written pretty much for our level, so go for it. So get into that article, answer one of those questions, and then I'll send you off on your next activity. Let's engage in a little conversation. So what do you think? Interesting, right? Would 1984 have been relegated to BuzzFeed back in the 1940s? Maybe people would have said, well, this is just BuzzFeed kind of news. Propaganda to get the people worried. But interesting what technology has driven us to. Let's have a little bit of a dialogue. So you can kind of invigorate what you said here on the board. See responses pouring in. What do you think? What are some of the similarities?
How technology today is kind of like the mystery of truth, how they could tamper in culture, like history.
Yeah, Darren.
Like it's almost similar in the sense that like the people like stop being lesser people and more of like being just robots being controlled by the government.
Yeah. What are some other similarities? So really close. Yeah, Rachel.
To go off of both of theirs, it's kind of like a use of power, which is what I thought in the sentence of use of the internet and how it said that these manipulations will cause an erosion of trust. And so I feel like they both lead to just like this lack of personal will, I guess. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. It does. What about this here? What about this here? Who has this in our book? Who has this? If you're the most up-to-date reading, you were probably just reading some of this. Who has this in our book? Who would you say? Which character in our book has reality apathy as it's described by what's the author's last name? What? Orwell or whatever?
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah. Who's got reality apathy? That's not Orwell's words. That's kind of this new term that's been coined in our 21st century based on the idea that if someone gets to the point where they can't tell fact from fiction or what's fake or fact, that they'll just start having this reality apathy, the article is saying, right? Who's got that? This is exactly what Orwell was describing, and he was using a character to show this reality apathy. Who's got reality apathy? Have you seen it? What'd you get? Winston doesn't, because Winston actually is the one that's so concerned with the way things are and wants them to really change and wants to...
Winston's neighbor didn't.
Why the neighbor? Why would the neighbor have reality apathy?
The big guy.
Okay. The big guy, he's super into the government and believes everything they say. Okay.
Human soundtrack.
Winston's first wife.
Okay, what makes her have reality apathy?
Because like she is so like concerned of what the party's gonna find out and like what to know and stuff. Like she goes to this meeting or something that Winston talks about.
Yeah.
And it's like she goes just for the sake of the party or something like that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Now remember, reality apathy is this idea that if we can't tell fact from fiction, we're just going to give up on all of it and not care. And whether it's fact, whether Oceana is responsible for inventing planes or not, like, who really cares? It doesn't impact my day-to-day life. So there's a character that Orwell describes as exactly this, as having reality apathy. I want you to catch it and then be able to tell me where and describe it. So you can do that in your next readings. I'll post that actually as a question to consider. So, okay, what you're going to do, I want to have a pop-up debate based on this. I want to hear from every single one of you, because all of your brilliant minds have something to say about this connection, right? It's crazy to read literature from 70-something years ago, and because of technologies that Orwell himself couldn't even have dreamed of, even his book, the technologies are very limited, right? Because he would have had such a limited perspective on how far-reaching technology could have gone, right? He had no idea what the internet was going to be like. And you guys have no idea what it's like to live a life without it. He had no idea what it would be like to have it. You have no idea what it's like to be without it. And because of that technology, man, this connection is crazy. So I want to hear from each one of you. So
wait, do we fill out the debate?
Please do. So, as Pani was alluding to there, please fill out in preparation for the pop-up debate. Please fill out your pop-up debate worksheet. You'll notice the 2 goals that I want you to make sure you accomplish. I want to make sure you have eye contact with the majority of the audience, not just looking at me. And I also, what's the other goal I put in there? I want you to reference the article. So that becomes so important to public speaking. Being able to say, according to Wessel, it's a fact that, or according to Wessel, it's stated that, right? So I want you to be able to reference the article when you get up and speak. That's important. And then address the majority audience. Eye contact with the majority audience, not just on me. So fill out that form in preparation for the pop-up debate. Go ahead and use that box to start writing in some potential arguments that you might have. And you'll notice the pop-up debate questions are there for you to look at. We can kind of angle off of any of those questions. And then here's sort of the big overarching question right here. Do you think this is a legitimate warning? Why or why not?
I think this is a legitimate warning because in the novel 1984, even with the limited technology that George Orwell predicted, it still created the dystopian society. And then with the modern technology, which is like really advanced, like according to the article, it says it can do the like lip sync video, it can like Photoshop, and it can make like fake news with just a matter of like few clicks. So I think it can create really dangerous environment for people, especially in the modern era, because in the modern era people depends a lot on the technology.
I don't believe that this argument is reasonable due to the fact that technology and misinformation have been developed throughout history hand in hand. Avidya in this article claims that new technological developments on the internet and like nowadays are causing terrifying methods of misinformation to arise, but yet methods of deception have risen throughout technological developments in history. So, for example, starting with like the development of clothing, or Adam and Eve, when they deceived themselves from the eyes of God, and the printing press led to misinformation being spread, and the telephone gossip, etc. So in a way, technology and misinformation have been developed hand in hand. And so the appearance of misinformation that comes alongside technology is not unique to the development or the growth of the internet in modern day, so I don't think it's that big of a thing to worry about.
Okay, so I think technology is very dangerous as it can alter reality. The printing press is one thing.
Only real memories exist only in people's heads, which no one else can see, so you don't really know what's true or not.
I see a direct correlation between the warnings in Orwell's book 1984 and the article written by Charlie Warzel, and how they both warn us about the abusive power of the government, and in our case, those who have access to the internet and programs that are made to manipulate the truth. Like in the book, Winston was unaware of what was actually going on in the world and what was even true about his own history. And we can see this reappearing in the article as present issue in our time. It is quoted in the article that because of this erosion of trust, it will only take one strong hoax to cause us to question everything we come across. Personally, I think that this is a legitimate warning because we already see it occurring around us with the constant development of software. The manipulation of truth could result in the world being sectioned off and news being more of a comic book than our reality.
Stuff. I mean, maybe for that's everybody, right? Great job. This is wild stuff. Maybe for your generation it seems so, well, it's your backyard, right? It's kind of what's going on in your world. But for me, this is crazy that we have to have these discussions, that we would have ever gotten to this point where you would have to worry about not, being so well fooled by someone into thinking that an event actually happened that you might not have a legitimate way or the resources available to determine whether it's fake or fact. Okay, you've got a new section of reading, 136 to 156. It's not too bad, and of course you have the weekend to read it. So here's some outside class prep that you have to go along with it, though. So we are working towards those oral debates, and so you are meeting particular criteria as you work towards those oral debates. This is the first one that you're doing. Choose the purpose of the presentation. So quite simple. Choose the purpose of your presentation and complete and upload the document that you find there. Now think through the purpose of this presentation. You already know the prompt. When government speaks, right? So think through what is for you. For you, what is the purpose of this presentation? Here's an example. The purpose of my oral presentation is to convince my audience that when governments speak, we should attempt to falsify all communication information and sell it to the highest bidder. Right now, obviously, I'm being facetious, but I've thought out, in this example, really what I want my purpose to be with this prompt when governments speak. So you will need to do that as well. Here are your new questions to consider for 136 and 156. Do remember that these questions to consider can show up in a reading accountability quiz, which you will have one next week. You'll have one reading accountability quiz next week.
Which day?
Yes, the last, whatever your last day is. So not Monday, so
Wait,
Tuesday, right? Tuesday it is. So we get to know Winston and Julia better. What are a few of their prep? And make sure you get that done, and you are free to roam about the school.